Hello and welcome to Aviation This Week on Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka. It's been more than 98 years since the first aircraft landed in Nigeria in Kano and Maiduguri. The historic flights involving three de Havilland DH-90 aircraft belonging to the Royal Air Force, RAF. And over the years, there's been several legal instruments regulating the sector, from the Civil Aviation Law of 1990, 2006, 2015, and now the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority is currently working on implementing new civil aviation regulations following the introduction of the new Civil Aviation Act 2022, assented to by the President. On this week's edition of the program, we'll look at the steps taken by the NCAA to come up with a new legal document for the sector. Here's our background report.
Civil aviation is a critical element in Nigeria's air transport system and indeed its economy. The Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, being the regulatory body for the sector, is saddled with the responsibility of governing the affairs of all airline operators in the country. Africa's most populous nation is an important destination for over 22 foreign carriers. A critical reason for the NCAA to keep up with the best practices and review its regulations in Nigeria. For this reason, the federal government is meeting with stakeholders in the industry at the NCAA headquarters, Abuja, physically and virtually, to discuss the proposed amendment of the Nigeria Civil Aviation Regulations and to agree on a new set of guidelines that will replace the 2015 document currently in use.
We're in the process of procurement of MPIC regulatory software. About 35 countries are using it globally. It's an excellent software that will automate all our processes. And the first module that has to do with licensing. When we get that model, it automates a lot of the processes. You go online, you apply, you pay your fees, you submit your documents, and everything is done to be automated. So when we have that system in place, are we comfortably able to deal with what is required by Annex 1 Chicago Convention? Then we can look at other licenses to put that. But I think what is important is to deal effectively and efficiently with what is mandatory. Once we have this system online, then the others, we can look at others in order of priority and implement them.
According to the agency, the plan is to strengthen the industry, particularly in the area of safety.
We've had fees and charges that have been not updated since 2009. So there was a need to actually review that. Some good things you're also going to find out in this regulation is that the validity period of AOCs have been extended to 5 years for scheduled operators and 3 years for non-scheduled operators, just to give the AOC holders some freedom of carrying out their operations without interruption. So we used to have what we call Manual of Standards and Aerodrome Standards Manual. So those manuals contain some ICAO standards that were outside the regulation. So we reviewed the regulations to integrate them into the regulations. The publication of the regulations will be on the web. The regulations are going to be more interactive and more user-friendly. So this is in line with the drive of the NCAA mission and the Director General to see that we use more of technology.
We're going to be having a page that we have said is going to be the summary of amendments, because we don't want to be doing a full issue of the regulation anytime there's an amendment that like we have been doing in the past. So for subsequently, after these 2023 regulations, every amendment to any part will be captured in the summary of amendment page. So when you pick up whatever it is, you now know the ICAO annex and the amendment number that is being used. For this proposed amendment, we're going to be having the Civil Aviation 2015 regulations repealed, and then the schedule of fees that have been promulgated since 2006, we are also repealing them, and all the others, 2002 other one, 2003, 2001 other one, 2002 other 1, 2, 3, they are all going to be revoked and cease to have a force of law immediately these regulations becomes effective.
Aviation industry players believe the review has been a long time coming.
There's need to upgrade any crew license at 865 if 70-year-old passes his periodic medicals, including stress tests and rescue ECG. Now, the NCA comment response is, this is noted. The current requirement that we have is in line with Airlines 1 provisions. For any increase in age, there needs to be a study. This study is to look at the risk analysis, look at the regulatory impact assessment, as done by other states. The ICAO has put that on the page that every state needs to do its own individual risk assessment.
After 8 years of unfiltered registrations, experts in the aviation industry anticipate that deliberations reached at this meeting will bring out regulations that will be in compliance with high standards and recommended best practices in the sector.
Constant review of the civil aviation regulations will help the sector compete with international best practices and also conform with new innovations that will provide better services for the people. This is according to the Managing Director of Top Brass Aviation, Captain Roland III, who speaks during our interview segment.
If you look at the regulations they've proposed, and what's in the industry, what's been thrown out there is about a 561-page document, which the industry has been poring over in the last month. I have taken time to review the document as well, but I have not completed my reviews. However, I mean, one of the things I think we should applaud the CAA for is the recognition of the fact that when you're certificated as an airline, you have an AOC. The requirement to have it renewed every 2 years is a tremendous workload, which the CAA themselves can ill afford to bear. So the idea of extending the lifespan of an AOC to 5 years is a welcome development. And I think it's also good for the CAA because, I mean, they've always complained about not having enough manpower. And if you don't have enough manpower and you increase your workload, essentially it would affect your effective oversight of industry. I think they've come to that realization. And of course, they're making amends to ensure that they can deliver on their mandate. So that's a good development to start with. They've also gone on to review the issue of taxes, charges, and what have you. I think that's a setback that I would say in the regulations they're reviewing, because my take with that is that the NCAA is all about how much money it can generate. My view is that the CAA, just like every other service provider in the industry, are actually not-for-profit organizations. And until they're able to do a cost-benefit analysis, do a cost allocation analysis, provide us with an audited account or how much it costs them to run in terms of recurrent expenditure, in terms of maybe the last 5 years of their budgets to see what they were able to do in terms of performance, it will be very difficult to establish that all these monies they're asking for is actually required. I don't want to go into the sort of debatable areas, but I mean, for me, the only way you can have losses in a civil aviation organization is because you have surplus. So it sounds contradictory, but what I'm trying to say essentially is that you cannot say that you're losing anything except there's a surplus. If there's no surplus, you would have gone bankrupt. So I think there's a need to look clearly into the finances of all the organizations to be able to determine what is required to run them. Otherwise, the arbitrary increases that we're seeing in terms of charges, taxes, and fees is not in the longer term interest of the industry. And again, if you read most of the reports by OAG, by IATA, they have always maintained that the fees, taxes, and charges in the sub-region are the highest, which is also an inhibiting factor for the growth of the industry. So I think this needs to be looked at critically, and it shouldn't be just like, adopted as a way forward in the industry, because it's become a norm that every time there's a need for the industry to grow, the next thing the industry does is to increase fares and increase charges, and these for me a lot of times are arbitrary. So that needs to be looked at. So for me, that's the negative side of this whole exercise. So what the CA is doing right now is actually taking cognizance of all the changes and the developments in the industry in the last couple of years to ensure that the regulations actually to take cognizance of all these changes so that everything can be properly regulated. That's essentially what it is. And in terms of the impact for the country at large, it actually shows growth and development for the industry. And to that extent, it shows that aviation in Nigeria is growing. And if you take cognizance of the fact that you cannot sort of divorce aviation from the economic growth of any country, it tells me that with the recorded growth in the industry, we can see a commensurate growth in the GDP of a country. So invariably, these are not things you can separate to a large extent. Economy and the industry, the sector are interlinked. And if we see growth in aviation, obviously it means there will be growth in the economy. So that's, to a large extent, that's the impact on the larger economy. So I think it's important from time to time that this is done to bring up to speed all that is required to show where we are and where we ought to be. Government is a continuum, right? And I expect that the incoming government, fortunately, it's an APC government. That's what we see now. I expect the government to review whatever is on ground, look at what fits into their agenda, because every government comes in with their own manifesto. Even though it's an APC government, you're aware that we're going through some sort of economic doldrums at this point. It is almost likely that the incoming government may review the expenditures such that they can make savings to take us out of a depression that we're in at this point. So they may not necessarily go on to say that all the activities lined up by this current government, they will take on hook, line, and sinker, simply because there might not be enough funding for it. And the priorities, of course, will be sectors like health, education. So it's important that, whichever government comes in is able to assess the situation and then determine how to proceed. But I expect largely that being the same party, that, they would go ahead to say that they will review whatever is required and see which one of them is doable. And I guess what will be doable will be seen in consonance with their own agenda to see how to drive the economy forward and grow the economy.
And when we return from this break, we'll bring you the highlights of the commissioning of firefighting vehicles by the federal government. Plus, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has named 44-year-old Christina Koch as the first woman and first African-American ever assigned as astronauts to a lunar mission. That's on the foreign scene. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, FAAN, has commissioned 10 firefighting vehicles to address emergencies. The Minister of Aviation, Mr. Hadi Sirika, who carried out the exercise at the Murtala Mohammed Airport, says some of the equipment will be stationed at the Murtala Mohammed Airport in Lagos, while the rest will be deployed to the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, and the Malam Aminu Kano International Airport, Kano, for safety reasons.
10 brand new high-capacity firefighting vehicles have been rolled out by the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria at Murtala Mohammed in Lagos to improve safety of flight operations in the country. The Lion Vulcan 6X6 brand major aerodrome rescue and firefighting vehicles carries 14,000 litres of water, 1,700 litres of foam with 250 kilograms powder capacity for each. The Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, alongside the Managing Director of FAAN, Captain Rabiu Yadudu, hand over the equipment to rescue and firefighting officials. It will serve Lagos, Abuja and Kano airports.
You all remembered our children that left Abuja to Port Harcourt in the Sosoluso crash. We couldn't save those children because some of them, even though the airplane landed or crashed, they were still alive. We didn't have the adequate, proper fire cover to save those lives. And parents were seeing their children burning alive that they sent to school. That is so sad. The MD had just told you that in the last 15 years, there's not a single fire tender that has been supplied. We all cannibalize 2 or 3 to make one. And the absence of fire cover is #1 reason to close down an airport. Even if you have them, you don't have enough number, you downgrade the airport to a lower category until when you close it completely. I don't know of anything, except maybe an obstruction on the runway. I don't know of anything that would happen to an airport or its absence will cause you to close down the airport completely. It's a very serious matter. These fire tenders, 10 of them, delivered, supplied by Gulf of Africa, we thank them, is over 12 billion naira. And certainly 12 billion naira is a huge amount of money to be deployed in one section of an airport.
To improve safety and security of flight operations, the Managing Director of FAAN says continuous training will be carried out for airport officials, especially those who will be operating the machines.
This transformation cuts across 3 core areas, namely the rehabilitation, upgrade, and replacement of infrastructure nationwide, capacity development in terms of manpower and all our officers across Nigeria, training and manpower development, and then facility expansion and improvement. And it also monitors the discharge rate of between 6,000 to 10,000 liters per minute. The acceleration rate is 0 to 80 kilometers per hour in 30 seconds, which is well within the recommended standard limits. The truck can discharge while in motion, which means it has a professional pump and roll operation, and is equipped with under-chassis nozzles to tackle running fuel fire. The vehicles will be deployed to this airport, Murtala Mohammed International Airport, the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja, the Malam Aminu Kano International Airport in Kano, while we are also processing for additional vehicles that will cater for Port Harcourt and Enugu. And this relief of the brand new 10 vehicles affords us the luxury of now having to easily redistribute the existing ones that are very old. This supply affords us the luxury of redistributing the old ones that are aged and unreliable for major repair and maintenance, and we can now improve the protection of the other airports, pending when the new ones come.
The newly acquired fire equipment vehicles will go a long way in addressing emergency issues at the airports, as the Air Rescue and Firefighting Department have been asked to make the best of the gadgets in order to tackle any emergency. The National Aeronaut and Space Administration has named the first woman and the first African-American ever assigned as astronaut to a lunar mission, introducing them as part of the 4-member team chosen to fly on what would be the first crewed voyage around the moon in more than 50 years. Christina Koch, a 44-year-old, is an engineer who holds the record for longest continuous space flight by a woman and was part of NASA's first 3 all-female spacewalks. Named as a mission specialist for the Artemis II lunar flyby expected as early as next year.
We are going to launch from Kennedy Space Center through the work of the Exploration Ground Systems team. We're going to hear the words, "Go for launch," on top of the most powerful rocket NASA's ever made, the Space Launch System. And we're going to ride that rocket for 8 minutes into Earth orbit. We're not going to go to the moon right away. We're going to stay in an amazing high orbit, reaching a peak of tens of thousands of miles while we test out all the systems on Orion and even see how it maneuvers in space. And then, if everything looks good, we're heading to the moon.
She will be joined by a 46-year-old Victor Glover, a United States Navy aviator and veteran of 4 spacewalks, who NASA has designated as pilot of Artemis II. He will be the first black astronaut ever to be sent on a lunar mission.
That is thank you to the NASA workforce. Thank you to our industry partners. Thank you to the Canadian Space Agency, everyone in Europe that's working for this. We got people in Airbus working our European service module. This is a global effort, Artemis II, and it's only going to get larger with Artemis III and beyond as we get private spaceflight involved. SpaceX is building our lander for Artemis III.
Rounding out the crew are Jeremy Hansen, a Royal Canadian Air Force colonel and first Canadian ever chosen for a flight to the moon as a mission specialist. There's also Reid Wiseman, another former United States Navy fighter pilot, named as mission commander. Both are 47 years old. All 3 NASA astronauts chosen for the Artemis II mission are veterans of previous expeditions aboard the International Space Station. Hansen, as an astronaut from the Canadian Space Agency, is a spaceflight rookie. Kazakhstan's flagship airline, Air Astana, is speeding up its expansion plans to take advantage of a drop in air traffic via Russia and the reopening of China. Many global airlines stopped flights to Russia after it sent its troops to Ukraine last year. As a result, Moscow has lost its status as a hub for flights between Europe and Asia, allowing its southern neighbor, Kazakhstan, to boost its market share.
Worked out generally positively. I think we have to remember that when we stopped services to Russia on the 11th of March of 2022, the recovery post-COVID was only at its beginning. So in fact the loss of those services to and from the Russian Federation was much less than it would have been had it happened 3 years earlier.
Air Astana, part owned by Britain's BAE Systems, posted a record profit of $78.4 million last year as its traffic grew 11% to 7.4 million passengers, even though the company has also ceased flights to Russia. The company plans to grow its fleet to 50 aircraft by the end of 2023 from the current 44 aircraft, and is accelerating expansion plans for the coming years.
And that's the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. Join me again next time. I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.